All right, today we're jumping into a really powerful idea called economic parasitism. This comes from an analysis over on the blog Fit Body to Fit Mind, and the whole thing really boils down to one single, pretty provocative idea.
Just read that again. Spread the losses among the people and privatize the gains. That one sentence, that's the key to this whole concept. It describes a system that, according to the source, basically flips traditional economics right on its head. So let's break down what that actually means.
So what is it? Well, the source defines it as a system where these massive institutions, they get to keep all their profits, right? But when their big, risky bets go wrong, the public, that's all of us, is forced to cover the losses. It's the ultimate heads I win, tails you lose game. And we're going to unpack exactly how this is supposed to work through 4 different lenses.
Okay, first up, we have to look at the philosophy of risk itself. The source here argues that this entire system is built on a complete, fundamental perversion of how risk and reward are supposed to work.
This slide really lays it all out. Look, in a healthy system, risk and reward are tied together. They're tethered. You take a risk, and if you fail, you bear the loss. Simple. But in the broken system being described here, that link is completely severed. The consequence gets decoupled. So the gains stay private, but the losses, they get pushed onto everybody else. It creates this really dangerous imbalance.
And that imbalance leads directly to this something called moral hazard. It's a psychological thing. I mean, think about it. If you knew you'd never actually have to pay for your mistakes, why wouldn't you make bigger, crazier, more reckless bets? There's literally no downside for you, only for the safety net that's forced to catch you when you fall.
All right, let's move to our second lens and see how this whole thing builds. The source argues that this dynamic doesn't just bend the rules, it fundamentally distorts the entire idea of a free market.
And this quote, wow, it gets right to the heart of the critique. It's suggesting there's a 2-tiered system of accountability. For the average person, it's all about rugged individualism. You succeed or you fail on your own merit, but for these huge institutions, it's a totally different story. It's like a form of socialism, where they're protected from failure, from cradle to grave.
So you might be asking, how does a system like this keep going? Well, the source lays out this really powerful 4-step cycle. First, you privatize the gains. The winners pile up just massive amounts of capital. Then, what do? They use that capital to influence the rules of the game in their favor. This encourages even riskier behavior that eventually leads to failure. But instead of facing the music, that failure gets rebranded as a public emergency that needs a collective bailout. And just like that, the cycle resets and starts all over again.
And this brings us to the third and, maybe the most corrosive consequence of all, the impact this has on society itself, on trust.
If these institutions don't have to face the consequences of their own actions, then who does? Who is this invisible safety net that we keep talking about?
The answer, according to the source, is pretty stark. The public. We become an involuntary insurance policy. We're forced to pay the premiums with our tax dollars and our labor, but we never, ever get to share in any of the profits.
This is where the concept of the commons is so important. Think of the commons as all of our shared resources, public funds, clean air, and maybe most importantly, social trust. When you socialize losses, you are essentially dumping the toxic waste of bad private decisions right into that shared space. And people see this, right? Slowly but surely, the social contract, that fundamental idea that we are all in this together, it just starts to dissolve.
And the ultimate outcome of all this erosion of trust is what the source calls institutional nihilism. It's that widespread belief that the game is rigged, that the system isn't fair anymore, but that it's actually become a predatory machine designed to do one thing: extract wealth and funnel it upwards.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most powerful metaphor in this whole analysis, looking at the economy, not as a machine, but as a biological system, a living thing.
Think of it this way. A healthy organism, or a healthy economy, it feels pain. It gets direct feedback from bad decisions, and because of that feedback, it learns, it adapts. But a system that socializes its losses, it's like an organism with an autoimmune disease. It's numb to pain, so it can't learn. And instead of growing stronger from its challenges, it becomes fragile and actually begins to attack itself.
So here's the crucial point. When you prevent the natural death of failing institutions with things like bailouts, you stop a really vital process called creative destruction.
That's the healthy, natural cycle where old, inefficient things die off to make room for new, better, healthier ones to grow. Without that, the whole system just becomes brittle and weak, and this leads to something really problematic.
You get these zombie institutions. They're not really alive, but they're not allowed to die either. They just kind of shuffle along, propped up by public funds, draining resources and vitality and life from the rest of the economy.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty sobering question to think about. The source really forces us to ask, if our economic system is designed in a way that literally prevents it from learning from its own mistakes, what does that mean for its long-term health? And more importantly, what does it mean for all of us who have to live in?